Greetings. In this week's Future Transform recording, we have a terrific conversation with one of my favorite people in higher education. That's Alex Usher of Higher Education Strategy Associates in Toronto. And Alex does just tremendous work taking a look at the huge global picture of higher education. And he does so with an incredible grasp of data and, as I say in the recording, a fine sense of humor. Our conversation raced around the world. We talked about everything from international students to the impact of AI to how different nations' higher education ecosystems grapple with demographics. It's a fascinating conversation. Please enjoy, and if you like it, click like and subscribe, of course, and especially we'd love to hear your comments at the end. Enjoy. Speaking of how it goes, let's begin. Let me welcome everybody. Let me welcome you to the Future Trends Forum. I'm very glad to see all of you here today. We have one of my favorite guests talking about, well, the very things that we discuss. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Let me just start off by introducing our guest. For my money, Alex Usher is one of the great analysts and observers of higher education globally. He has a few traits that I find incredibly admirable. One of them is that he has, I think, an unparalleled grasp of data, both in wrangling out data from obscure sources and then turning it into coherent narrative. The second is that he is a truly global analyst. Few people manage to do this properly, but he really thinks in terms of higher education worldwide. So he's someone you could find doing reviews of scholarly books about the Baltic republics and their university history in the Soviet period, or about the economics of Egyptian higher education. And third, putting him on the spot here, he has a terrific wry sense of humor that helps communicate that all. Now, before I go say anything more, let me just bring this gentleman up on stage. Alex, good to see you, sir. Where are you today?
I'm in my office in Toronto, but it's very it's a warm day here, so I decided to go with a full Miami Vice vibe. So
Well,
you can be sunny to my Crockett.
well, I appreciate the pink suit. That's and also the nice background of multiple pieces of art. And in the chat, just so you know, Alex, people observe that you have a beard, which continues the
Mm.
conspiracy theory that you have to have a beard in order to be a guest on the program. But let me just ask you to return to our classic question, which is describe yourself by talking about what you're going to be working on for the next year. I assume your blog is going to come back to life in a few weeks, but what else are you going to be working on?
The big news is we have a new global almanac coming out beginning of December, and it's a mix of a roundup of global stories from our media monitoring services that we're doing. It's partly about changes in top institution strategic planning, and it's partly about changes in student numbers and funding. So we've got a pretty good grasp of about 85% of the world higher education system. So
Fantastic. I mean,
and that's
is there anything like this that's comparable?
No, no. I mean, GEMS, the UNESCO tries to do this with what's called the Global Education Monitoring Series, but it's
Mhm.
mostly aimed at K-12. Um, unfortunately, post-secondary data is hard to wrangle from some places, and so it's not easy to collect. Even UNESCO doesn't find it easy to collect. But I think the way that we're doing this is hopefully we'll have something that I can put this summer. It's taking up all my summer. But in future, hopefully we'll be able to do this a little quicker and a little and it'll be easy for us to do, and we'll be able to add to it as time goes on.
Well, fantastic. I can't wait to see that. That's going to be so useful. Um, and I imagine that's going to take up a lot of time. And we use, of course, Higher Education Strategy Associates.
Yes.
Yes, excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to that as always. And of course, to your remind everybody what your blog is called again.
My blog is called One Thought to Start Your Day. You can sign up on the website. It's www.higheredstrategy.com/blog. There's nothing new on there now because I quit in the end of the second week of June. I take 10 weeks off in the summer, and we're back just after Labor Day. So we'll be back to our 4 days a week of looking at this stuff. So
Oh, that's easily one of my favorite reads. So, Friends, if you're new to the forum, what happens now is I'm going to ask our kind guest a couple of questions just to get the ball rolling. But then it's going to be over to you for your comments, your questions, your thoughts. So as Alex responds, and as you're thinking about what he says, please think about what you'd like to ask him as we go. So I wanted to start off with one question. It's a kind of narrow question, but it's a narrowness that slices across the world, which is what's going to happen to international study? And for everybody else who for whom this question might be a surprise, I'm referring to the apparent decline of international students arriving in the United States, the already evident massive decline in international students arriving in Canada, similar declines in Australia and in the United Kingdom, each for different reasons, but it looks like a lot of these big anglophonic players are seeing a decline in international students. What's going to happen next? Is the total flow of international study going to drop down a bit, or is India going to become the next destination? What's happening?
India's never going to be a destination. So it's clear that, I mean, look, you got to remember that part of the international student market is actually an emigration market, right? These are people who want to emigrate. And that was certainly the case in Canada. And we were effectively selling paths to citizenship through our community colleges until, the policy dam burst about 18 months ago. And so what we're seeing, some of that's just going to evaporate. Um, but I think that's partly missing what's really some of the bigger shifts that we're seeing, which are more south-south shifts. I mean, there are, countries who always say, oh, the the loss of the US or the UK or Australia or Canada. It's like we're gonna pick that up. Well, there's nowhere big enough to pick that up, right? Like those four countries together are something like, if you exclude the Erasmus students who are, sort of it's kind of an internal market to the EU,
Mhm, mhm.
that's half the market. Like there's no country big enough to do that. So, New Zealand says, is New Zealand the next hot destination? Well, New Zealand's the size of Minnesota, right? Like it's not going to, so yes, its numbers will go up. That doesn't mean it's going to absorb the change. You are seeing already more students going to Germany. You're seeing more students go to India. Yeah, maybe, Japan will pick up a few. Like, yeah, so yes, other countries will benefit, but it doesn't really change. They can't absorb that number of students. And so I just think the number of students is probably going to go down. What I would watch though is uh, Dubai, because it's quite clear that there's a huge number. Like I think actually Dubai is going to pick up more students than New Zealand will. Indian students like it better. They can watch, frankly, the cricket's better. And so they can, well, every time there's a fight in India, they move the cricket to Dubai in order to finish the season. Um,
Huh.
so I mean, I think there's that issue. What's really interesting is what's going on in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And these are countries that have used the turmoil in Russia and Ukraine. Both are countries that took in a lot of medical students from India, from Malaysia, from other parts, from Iran.
Mm.
That was sort of their equivalent of, the medical schools in the Caribbean for American students, or, medical schools in Austria or Hungary for German students. Now with the war, nobody wants to go there, and so you're getting a huge shift of international students moving into Central Asia now. And it's really interesting to see Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan pivot from being net exporters of students to being net importers, because
Oh.
because they've been very, very aggressive about bringing in private education, bringing in international players. I've lost count of the number of international schools that have opened in those two countries in the last 12 months. Uh, so you know what I mean? Like there's some interesting south-south movement going on.
Mm.
The Philippines is certainly trying to get into it. Thailand's trying to get back into it. So that I suspect is long term the more interesting set of moves that we'll see. But I think a lot of the people that you will, I suspect we've probably hit a temporary high overall in international students, because the ones who go to Canada are not necessarily the ones who want to go to Uzbekistan, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not a one, you can't shift it, right? The demand doesn't divert quite that easily because obviously people are asking for different kinds of education and different kinds of post-residency visas as well, post-study residency visas. But so there will be a lot happening in internationalization, but I think the simple answer to your question is a lot of the demand that we've seen is just going to evaporate. But that doesn't mean that there are new sources of demand, new springs that are coming up all the time.
Fascinating. I mean, that's going to be very, very complex to track. I mean, if you're talking about movement within the global south,
Hmm.
say within Asia, generally towards Central Asia,
Hmm.
seeing if the Philippines can become a destination, at least Southeast Asia. That's thank you. That's a in response in the chat. Elaine Losda asks, she's seen anecdotal commentary that Europe in general is looking to brain drain the US. Do you think European universities have a shot, or are they just going to skim off a few professors here and there like Toronto did?
Well, Toronto's special though, because Toronto is one of the very few universities outside the United States that has American flagship levels of resources.
Hmm.
There are very
Hmm.
few universities in the world that have that, right? Like if I can think about the universities who can bring in star university professors, it's nationally, it's NUS in Singapore. It's
Hmm.
probably not any of the Hong Kong universities anymore. Maybe there's a couple of the Japanese universities, Tohoku, Kyoto, Todai. Um, there just aren't very many. Like I see a lot of university. Like I think the first university to do it was a fairly nondescript mid-tier French university who said, we're offering academic asylum
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
American university professors. Well, all I can say is American university professors wanting to go to France might want to check what the salary levels are,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I mean, the thing about the huge American own goal that's ongoing with with the administration shaking down institutions one at a time and attacking international students and all that kind of stuff. I mean, is that the U.S. in higher education is the one irreplaceable country,
Hmm.
right? Like, there's nobody
Hmm.
who can
Hmm.
pick up the pieces of this disaster. And I I know some people are thinking about this in terms of we Japanese should pick up some
Hmm.
talent. Like everyone's thinking about it in rankings terms. What I've been really disappointed by is the lack of international reaction to things like, the Americans saying we're not going to track. We had an $8 million worldwide measles tracking study, and we're not going to fund that anymore. I think it's really important. It would be great if global universities could get together and say, not how can we pick off the odd measles specialist, but how can we collectively maintain that resource, or at least partially maintain it, because that's really important for public health. So I think there's been way too much. So first of all, I don't think there will be many. It would be difficult to get American professors to go abroad just for financial reasons. I think it will be and I think there's way too much focus on attracting individual professors rather than, frankly, preserving the science.
Yeah.
Think about what's going on with the what do you call it, the NOAA. I mean, it's
Hmm.
shocking how much data is being lost. So who's working to, um, uh, to preserve that in order to preserve science? Like to me, that's the bigger goal, and I'm a little disappointed with the global reaction to it. So,
Yeah, that's a whole other topic to go into, especially for climate science. To see what nation could
all right.
step up for that. Elaine, thank you for the question. She adds a codicil. She asks about Dubai. What can Dubai do with this, given they have so much money?
So what Dubai has done in its knowledge village, and to some extent what Abu Dhabi's done, and there's satellite centers in Sharjah, which is only a half-hour drive away.
Hmm.
Um, they're really big on they'll build a campus for you, right? Like buildings are easy to put up in a desert. I don't know how easy they are to service with electricity and water, but you know what I mean? Like they'll do that. And so they've attracted a lot of international players by striking these kinds of deals. You staff it, we'll build it or part build it, or we'll give you concessionary rates or whatever. But the thing that makes it about Dubai attractive to a lot of places is just there's not a lot of red tape, right? You can start up
Hmm.
something very, very quickly there. as long as you're not asking for operating funding, right? So it's a different proposition than Qatar work. You know, Qatar's paying 80,000 bucks a student for at some of these places or that's what they were paying Texas A&M before Texas A&M bailed.
Yeah.
Georgetown's still there. They're still picking up that
Mhm.
money.
Yeah.
Anyways, I mean, so that's a different kind of games. But if you want to attract Indian students or students from wherever, and you can, I think there's some really interesting examples. Middlesex in the UK, Harriet Watt in the UK. They both put together good campuses there. I think you can draw on some of the success of NYU Abu Dhabi. I think they've done a better job than I would have expected 15 years ago at that campus. But of course, they have unlimited money basically to do that. But Dubai is just easy to work in. It's easy to fly into. It's I mean Emirates is a 12-hour flight for 90% of humanity. It's one of the
Right.
and it's very attractive for a lot of reasons. And depending on where you go, it's not that expensive. So if you're building a city with no limits, basically.
That's something to look for. I mean, this might be in the far future, say 6 months from now, it might be worth doing a report just on this. Um, I had a second question that came in, and this
Mhm.
was asked to me by multiple people who couldn't make it here today, which is from your global perspective, can you sketch out some of the different reactions to the artificial intelligence explosion? How are different nations' higher education systems responding to the huge boom of LLMs?
Uh, it's hard to know, frankly, because it's hard to wade through the hype and see what people are actually doing.
Hmm.
I would argue that we're still in many places still, thinking through what are the academic integrity questions, like what is
Hmm.
cheating anymore.
Hmm.
Um, I think what's a little bit dangerous in the United States. So I mean, the U.S. is always more, frankly, credulous about this than anybody else, right? I mean, you see lots of elements of MOOC hype in here, right? About how this is going to change the university forever and whatever. I think the place that I'm looking for this year is Ohio State University, right? So Ohio State made some pretty big commitments in May, June about what kind of institution they were all in, I think was their word, all in on artificial intelligence. God knows what that means. There will be some train wrecks there, I'm quite sure, but there will also be a lot of interesting experiments, I would say, which will be useful for other people to watch. Um, most people don't know what to do with I would say the majority of institutions, they have ideas maybe, but skills in making your own AIs. I mean, creating your own generative AI system that say, mimics various Chinese philosophers. So you can interview them and have them,
Yeah. Yeah.
argue with each other. I mean, some interesting stuff, the ideas in there. That takes work, right? And the problem is that AI's got everyone hooked on this idea that we're going to disintermediate everything. Yeah, it's that sort of MOOC thing, right? It's get rid of the teacher. We're going to have people who can give you facts faster. I'm not sure how many people buy it, to be honest with you. Like, there's certainly a lot of big companies that are trying to sell universities things, right?
Hmm.
Because AI companies are all losing money real fast and they need income sources, and big institutions are reliable income sources. So yes, there's a clear incentive for them to do that. I mean, I see around the world there are, Nigeria's set up an AI university. There's several countries this year who've set up AI universities. So it's not clear anybody knows what that means. And what is that? I mean, it might mean that we're still just teaching people to code. You're just teaching people to code slightly different things in slightly different ways. It's hard to know how it'll shake out. Nobody wants to be left behind. I think that's what they know. But I think that I would argue for most professors, where we're at is in about 1997, 1998.
Mm,
um,
mm.
for search. I mean, Google
Right.
right? Everybody is upset because the essay doesn't teach you what it used to teach you. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure the essays taught everybody what they thought it taught ever since Wikipedia
Mm,
arrived,
mm.
right? Like Wikipedia changed the way students interact with information and data. We got around it, right? Like we learned how to, get students to integrate that and to add to it in other ways. And I think that's a lot of what we're going to have to do with AI. Uh, but to my mind, AI is it's interesting that the people who are yelling about AI the most are the ones in humanities and social sciences. I don't hear the same kind of yelling out of the sciences, and that's a
Right.
tell. That's a tell. And what that means is uh, the only way we've been able to run social sciences and humanities efficiently in the last 50 years is through essays. That's how we mark people. That's an efficient way of, a ratio of student time to professor's time. And now we've realized we can't do the essay. We have to come up with a new method of assessment. That's the really hard part. And it's not clear to me we can do it with the kinds of student teacher ratios that we have right now in arts and social sciences. We got to figure something else out. So I
Can I
mean,
ask,
I think that's the interesting question, but I don't think most people are paying attention to it that way.
can I just quickly ask you a
Mm,
professional question
sure.
along local lines? You've been organizing this great series of Canadian events about Canadian
Yeah.
higher education responding to AI.
Mhm.
Is it still going on? And have you learned any lessons from that?
Well, I mean, look, I think the lesson, well, look, uh, our events are telling us that on the ground, nobody knows what's going on. And
Mm,
everybody feels very underprepared for this. Like,
mhm,
where do
mhm.
you start? Like, we're in need of vastly more people who can help individual professors work out how to integrate this stuff. How do I rethink my curriculum? How do I rethink assessment? How do I create new tools that students can use? um, the number of people with the expertise to do that is so tiny compared to the vast number of size of the prof sorry that needs to be trained. This is going to take a
Mm.
while,
Okay,
and I
thank you.
just and the AI industry I think will have changed massively by the time anyone gets around to actually um, working that problem out. So we're working with a moving target here.
That sounds like an opportunity. Um, Thank you. And friends, I'm gonna start putting forward your questions more. So as we've been going back and forth, please feel free to add more and more of your own. In the chat, we've had a discussion about several discussions going on, including about the Middle East as a destination for higher education, as well as about AI. We have a question from our good friend Kiel Dunsch, who asks this. The worst structural element of higher education the world over, in his opinion, is the degree system and credential inflation. China is particularly bad with pushing too many people to obtain degrees. The big game changer will be employers waiving degree requirements at hiring and using alternative credentials or even doing their own training. I would like Alex's views on this.
Easier said than done. I think is probably. I mean, Uh, I, I remember there was a fad sort of 5, 6 years ago in the United States, and right, let's get rid of degree requirements. You can get rid of degree requirements, but did it actually change who you hired? No, because degrees are a fantastic, or are one part of a filtering system.
Right.
And so I remember even Ernst and Young, I think, said we're not going to put a degree requirement on, and then they're still hiring everybody from Princeton and Harvard. It doesn't change who becomes a partner. Uh, The challenge that I've always seen here is that degrees are a language.
Hmm.
Everybody understands the language of degrees. They understand what a bachelor's degree means because, hey, we've been doing those for 900 years now. And they understand master's degrees because we've been doing those for a couple hundred years, and doctorates, yeah, I kind of understand what's in there. And telling somebody that you're going to get, well, I got a badge in this, or I've got a micro credential in this. What does it mean? It's not actually very transparent to the employer, I would say. And one of the huge differences between North America and Europe, say, Europe has been very, when they're thinking on micro-credentials, is the important thing about micro-credentials is the transparency of that credential. What
Hmm.
meta information about the credential is available to anyone, employer, university, who wants to see it. And here we're just like, and so they actually have, and they have frameworks, they have credential frameworks, they have skills frameworks. And so you can actually sort of say, well, this is a level 5 skill in this occupation. And so I know our employer looks at it and goes, oh, okay, I understand what that means. In North America, where our businesses don't like to cooperate and we don't like to have, national credential frameworks that actually mean anything, or skill frameworks, it's a lot harder to transmit that data. And so that's one of the things I think that's going to make micro-credential adoption in the long run. It'll be a lot. Um, it's probably not going to be as fast here as it is uh, in Europe or Australia, because we've made the language as hard to learn as humanly possible. Um,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
you know,
I can see the complexity of this just keeps ramifying. Um,
something, yeah.
yeah, in the chat, Keel adds, bottom line, way fewer people will pursue degrees going forward.
No evidence of that yet. I mean, maybe. I tell you what, the first really interesting things that I'm starting to see this year, though, for the very first time, and we've had years that have been bad for graduates, but I'm seeing in a few countries now that graduates are having a harder time getting jobs than non-graduates. You're starting to see that in the US, where graduate employment is slightly higher than overall unemployment. Seeing it in Taiwan, you're seeing it in China.
Hmm.
Um, you're seeing it in a number of countries around the globe. And lots of people are saying, AI is taking all the new jobs.
Hmm.
Um, maybe. I mean, it might also just be, graduates tend to get hit hardest in early stages of a recession too. And I think many parts of the world are in early stages of a recession right now. But the other thing I'm seeing is, well, let's say AI does reduce the returns to education. Then we really will have fewer people going to post-secondary. We really will have fewer people with degrees
Hmm.
because it won't be worth the salt. And I actually think people in higher education around the world have really got to think that one through, right? Like it'll be a decade before we know for sure. But I think it is I think it's probably only about a 20% possibility that AI is actually going to do that. But that's a big enough possibility. You think about it like, wow, you could really see numbers fall. How would you manage, declines in enrollment of that size?
Yeah.
What if everyone was like the American community college sector over the last decade? Like
Hmm.
that, they dropped by from what, 7 million to 4.5? Like it was a lot.
Yeah.
And I think, what if the rest of the higher education, the world higher education system gets hit with that kind of wave? Like I say, it's not going to happen quickly, but it could happen. And I don't know that anybody's really thought through what the consequences of that are.
Well, speaking of which, so first of all, Keel, as always, thank you for pursuing your line of inquiry and for framing such a powerful question. Thank you, Alex, for a really, really detailed and great answer to this. We had a question that we had multiple questions have come in. And one, I just lost the person who asked it, so please, person, forgive me if I don't have it. The question was about the community college pivot in the U.S. Towards dual enrollment, i.e., teaching high school students, and that
Mhm.
really bulked up community college enrollment. And this person wanted to know: is anybody else doing this elsewhere in the world, or is the U.S. unique in it?
Well, it's not completely unique. I mean, I've seen the occasional experiment like that in Canada or Australia, but most countries have a much sharper bar between higher education and the rest of the world than the US does, right? It's much less permeable. To get in, you have to have taken and passed, and in some cases passed spectacularly, national matriculation exams.
Hmm.
Right. So this idea that you would sort of let people, yeah, I'm not going to bother with that. Before I even do that, I got to get into college. Most countries it's just an impossible way of thinking. So There are not many international. The U.S. can do it because they don't actually care. There's lots of cases for adult students where you don't have to have finished high school in order to access a post-secondary program. And so when colleges in the States say, well, these kids are promising, why don't we just let them start early? It's not that big a deal. Well, it is in other countries, and so that's why they haven't gone with that experiment.
Again, my apologies to the kind person who asked this good question. Thank you for that, and Alex, thank you for that answer. You can see, friends, why I keep badgering Alex for questions about international higher education. Our good friend in Texas, Tom Hames, asks another question. He says, we have developed an important source of internationalism in American higher education. How long until the current throttling results in poverty? Is there built-up capital of internationalism that would carry us on over this, hopefully, interregnum?
You mean at the level of institutions becoming poor because they can't bring in international students? Am I reading that?
That's
No,
that's
I meant
please.
that as a cultural question.
Okay,
Okay,
Oh.
in the sense of universities have been sort of a center of internationalism in the
got it.
country in terms of contact with other cultures and the rest of the world, and that's only increased. But now, if we don't have those international students, I mean, I have international friends because I met them as an undergraduate. Now I'm also half international myself, but but the point is that I'm half German. But the point is that that conduit could dry up, as these things happen. And what's that going to do to the culture of the schools?
Yeah, I don't have a good sense. I mean, I suspect it will vary quite a bit from school to school, but I mean, certainly at large, the flagship state universities or the big Eastern privates, they've been taking in international students since the late 19th century, in various ways, and they've been sending students abroad in various ways. So I would be shocked if 4 years changed that very much. Just because institutions' culture doesn't change that quickly. Um, I mean, I think what might be intriguing, to be honest with you, is more what happens to study abroad in the United States than students coming in, because study abroad, I got to tell you, as an outsider going to NAFSA meetings over the years, there is a missionary element to America's view of study abroad, which doesn't exist anywhere else, right? And it comes from the idea, in part, that back in the 1940s, 1950s, the top American schools said, "Holy cow, we run the world now. We should actually understand it." And so they would send people abroad and do it. And that's really where study abroad comes from. Now that we've ended Pax Americana and it's not coming back, right? Like the international order is not coming back. Nobody can trust the United States anymore. So its role, I mean, it might want to assume a former, its former leadership role, but it's not getting it back. Nobody's giving it up. Nobody's, I mean, everything in Europe and Canada has been about, okay, we got to assume, we can't assume anymore the Americans will be there with us. So that actually changes the context internationally for why American students go abroad, right? Like it's not, that's an interesting one. And I will be interested to see how that bounces back, hopefully after 2029.
Well, Tom, as always, thank you for a typically deep question. And it's one where, of course, some of us in the United States and academia in the United States are very, very concerned about this. Friends, we have a good time for more and more of your questions, and I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to ask. That was Ron Friedman, by the way, who asked about community colleges. So thank you for that. Um, we also had another U.S. question, if you don't mind,
Sure.
which is this is a kind of pregnant question. Some of the chaos in the U.S. State Department, How now the questioner put this to me privately, and I can't share it, and that's a sign of the climate here in the U.S. that we're doing this. I'm going to infer that question is referring in part to some of the conflicting uh, um, uh, policy agendas that are open and conflicting because Trump has not corralled them. Thinking, for example, about Marco Rubio pushing really hard to deport as many international students as possible via versus some of the other impulses we get, for example, from the Agricultural Department demanding more and more agricultural workers. And with other players in this involved, like Sebastian Gorka and Grinnell. Um, can you speak to this, or is this too far into the weeds?
Could you cut out for me for about 10 seconds
Oh,
there.
sorry.
So
Can you speak to this, or is this too far in the weeds?
No, I missed the initial question.
Oh, sorry. If you can speak about the chaos in the State Department and how
chaos in the State Department.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, as an outsider, all I can say is what the American media, well, with the media generally, because I think the international media is at least as guilty of it, what they see as policy moves by the Trump administration.
Mm-hmm.
To me, they're just, Trump wakes up and says, I need headlines. Like the policy is kick universities, kick foreigners. What they're doing at any given moment at state. I mean, in the month of May, I think I heard at least 7 different policies come out of the State Department around international students and what they were going to do. And some of it was being overturned in the courts and blah, blah, blah. Right.
Wow.
So I don't know what it's like to be in DC these days, but I'll tell you, the way this government from the outside doesn't look as though it thinks in terms of policies. It thinks in terms of vibes. What's the vibe I want to get? And like I say, kick universities, kick international students. And I sort of feel that that's about it. Like it's not really worth dealing with it at the level of policy because it's not actually being done that way. Brendan Cantwell had a good piece out today about government by vibes and deals, which I think is really smart. I mean, in the U.S., the guy that he was way ahead of everybody in figuring out how hard Trump was going to be on higher education. But I think Brendan Cantwell at Michigan State University is he's the guy I look to for commentary in the U.S. because I think he's just dead on.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And appreciate the, as always, more reading, which is good to see. And friends, you can tell that both Alex and I are pretty safe and sound. You can ask us all kinds of questions right now. To answer your question, one person weighed in and said it is awful to live in DC right now. And I can say that living in the DC area makes it very, very interesting right now. Another question I'd like to put to you is if you could speak to China. And there's of course so much to say about this. This is a nation whose scholarly output is now leading the world in quantity in some areas, as well as scholarship has some issues with paper mills. This is a nation that has rebuilt its higher education system since the disaster of the Cultural Revolution. But it also now has One Belt, One Road as a way for it to weave international student policy and action. What's your broad picture assessment of Chinese higher education on the world stage now?
Let me start with what I see about what's going on in higher education in China right now. And it's a really interesting case of how the benefits of investment last a long time, but they will wear away eventually, right? So what's shocking to me is that how fast investment in higher education slowed down after Xi Jinping came to power. And this is like a decade ago now, right? Like it's a long time since Xi Jinping came to power. But in the 15 years before that, annual growth in public post-secondary funding was running between 15 and 25% a year, right? Like it was wild. It's that was big money. And they had a very specific set of policies, and they've called it different things over time. They called it the 211 project and the 985 project and the double world class project. They've been dumping money on the top 35 or 40 universities for a very long time. And I think one of the things that we've seen over time with these excellence initiatives is the thing that matters is not the amount of money, it's how long you do it for. And China's been doing it for 30 years. And so those top 30 universities or so, they're pretty freaking impressive, right? Like I believe in the last Leiden survey globally of publications, that in terms of scientific publications, 7 of the top 10 in the world were now in China, right? Plus Harvard, plus, a couple of Toronto might have made the top 10 still because it's pretty prolific. Maybe Zurich, maybe Oxford, I'm not sure. But that's big, right? And at the same time, they've massively expanded their system of post-secondary education. Interestingly, in recent years, that's been much more at the 2-year level than the 4-year level. Like that's the really big increase in the last decade or so is that. But overall, you got to remember in 2006, there were 20 million students in America and there were 20 million students in China. And now there are 20 million students in America and there are 60 million in China. Like that's just, can you imagine the American system tripling in 3 years or tripling in 2 decades? Now, on a per capita basis, that still puts China below the US, but not by much. So they're getting to American levels of results. Income's a lot lower. Graduate income, if I'm not mistaken, last I checked was about $1,500 US a month for new graduates coming out. But then they're not paying big tuition fees either. They're paying fairly reasonable tuitions in most cases. So it's but the big news is that their public funding for post-secondary is now lower than it was in 2019. They've added 15 million students in those 5-6 years, but public funding has not budged. So I think they're storing up problems. I think what you're seeing is, and you see this in India too, to some extent, there's a lot of good things happening at the very top because of sustained long-term investments. But at the bottom, boy, I think they're storing up trouble. That's my impression.
That's really, really important insight. Thank you. Thank you very much. Friends, in my mind's eye, I have Alex Usher on speed dial whenever I have international higher education questions, and you can see why. We had another global question from Seth Fury, who deals with the perennial problem of people not being happy about paying for higher education. He asks this: do you see any change in the general trends worldwide for increasing tuitions or for the availability of scholarships?
I don't think there are global trends in tuition policy, to be honest with you. I think I see examples every year of people introducing or raising tuitions, and I see examples every year of people going the other way. I think this year, Namibia has declared free tuition. They don't know how they're going to pay for it, but they declared it. Ghana has introduced a first-year free policy. Bulgaria is raising tuition fees. You know what I mean? Like there's different things going on in different countries and they need to do different things. So I'm not sure there is a global trend. What I think there is a global trend towards more private higher education. Oh, sorry, let me rephrase that. In countries that do not allow much in terms of tuition at public sector universities, you are seeing an explosion of private universities. France, famously a free tuition country, is now 27% of students are at private institutions paying tuition fees. They don't have to. They choose to. A quarter. Wow. Spain is up to a quarter. Germany is up to 15%. Italy is up to, you know what I mean? Just all these countries, it's wild. all
Mm.
across Europe. It's one of the most stunning trends, but it's slow, so nobody's never really commented on it. But it's there. It's really big. And so I think that's important. And that lays in all sorts of questions about how do you regulate private higher education. Spain right now is going through a massive debate about how to regulate um, private institutions. France as well. It's a very, very interesting phenomenon right now. Um,
Thank you.
that's sort of running below the radar. Scholarships is an interesting question. I mean, well, student aid generally used to be a big deal in global higher education policy. People really wanted to know about what was working in New Zealand, what was working in UK. And that's more or less stopped. Like I haven't seen a new idea in student aid or a genuinely new program, in a long time. The only place I can think of where you've seen a lot of increase in scholarship money is South Korea, and that's because about what was it in the 2012 election, the president made a promise to reduce tuition fees, which is hard to do if 80% of the universities are private. And so what he did instead was he decided to just dump a crap load of money into student aid, sort of quintupling the size of the student aid system in just a couple of years. And I guess it's worked in the sense that South Korean universities have kept their numbers up while at the same time, uh, dealing with a very strongly declining demographic. So maybe that's a success.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. It's a really good question, and I appreciate the answer, Alex, especially about the slow but steady rise of private institutions. I mean, it's one of the challenges in futures work is trying to track these trends when they're not very telegenic, but are happening nonetheless. We have another confidential question coming from the
Yep,
U.S. side,
sure.
which has to do, and but I think this would apply to other countries as well. I think you'll see what I mean. The questioner asks about the merits and the risks of U.S. public institutions launching fully online undergraduate programs for international students, partly in response to the crisis over higher education, international students in the U.S. Um, is this something that we should expect? Um, and the questioner then asks if this would be viewed as a mission-driven innovation or as a money grab. What do you think about that? And you
Watch
can see what
ASU.
other countries could do this too.
Watch Arizona State. Arizona State's been doing deals with some very interesting companies around the world to allow them to use the curriculum to do much of it online. Of course, Arizona famously has doubled its enrollment
Yeah.
uh, in the last 15 years, mainly by going online. They've got that whole new campus in Tempe, I think, that's dedicated to that. And look, I mean, people have been talking about that market ever since Fathom, right? Like it's been 20 years since we've had this idea that like
Fathom. Wow.
great American universities are going to go out and conquer the world, and people will
That
have
takes me back.
Yale in their, in their living room, and it's never really happened. Um, because it's a very thin line. Like, which kind of institution would be prepared to turn itself into a global online university? Like we saw with MIT and Harvard and edX, right? I mean, with edX, they had a chance to make themselves global. They could give Harvard and MIT education at a fraction of the cost to the entire world, and they didn't want to do it because they thought that would cost them exclusivity. So,
Mhm.
and exclusivity is a bigger deal in the States than it is in some other countries, but everywhere it kind of matters. Who's the institution that doesn't care enough about exclusivity,
Mhm.
to take that route, but at the same time is desperate for money
Hmm.
and needs to go that route, right? Like it's a really thin line because most of the ones who, you know, I don't know, most of the people who would want to buy from, you want to buy from a name brand. And, I'm not sure that name brand and institutions in sufficient trouble to give up all notions of exclusivity. I don't know if those circles cross on the Venn diagram, right? Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so maybe, maybe. I always thought, but what Arizona State is, it's partnering with local institutions to do it. So there's ways of franchising what you do that that could be partly online without being fully online. Um, so I don't know. I think that's I think that's an issue. So
Well, thank you. That's a great answer to a great question. Thank you very much for that question. And I'd like to ask one of my own, which is a future-oriented question about demographics in higher education. I mean, so broadly
Mhm.
speaking, huge chunks of the world have gone through the demographic transition of people living longer and having fewer and fewer babies. And so we've seen the median age tick upwards in all kinds of countries, from Mexico to Finland, South Korea, and of course, Canada, uh, absent immigration. And I'm wondering, what have you seen of how post-secondary institutions that have gone through this kind of social transformation, how are they best responding to it? Are they doing well by teaching more and more adults, broadly speaking, or are they doing, except for the Anglophonic countries, are they doing better by reaching out to international students or online? Or what do you think? How is the global network of the global ecosystem of higher education grappling with the grand demographic transition?
So that's a really great question, because I think this is one of the biggest dividing lines in global higher education. Are you in a country that's growing or shrinking?
Hmm.
Um, and it's not always who you think it is. We're in those different
Mm,
uh,
mm,
areas, right? So, I mean, much of the chaos that you're seeing in the financing of African higher education, Nigeria, Kenya, I would say, are probably the two most obvious ones. Um, they can't keep up with demand. And so it's chaos, because either you're letting private higher education rip, which is what's happening in Nigeria, or you're making wild promises that you can't actually afford, which is what's happening in Kenya. But chickens are coming home to roost there. So there's still a lot of countries, like Africa's still growing pretty big. The median age of Africans is still what, 19, 20? Like, there's a lot of students coming through in the next couple of decades. Same with India. Same with Uzbekistan and
fascinating.
Kazakhstan, right? I mean, those are two countries which, although like everybody else in the Soviet Union, they went through a huge demographic crash in 1990. They're back. They're
Hmm.
back, and they're big. Like, it's amazing how fast the youth populations those countries are growing. Um, Obviously the countries that are in the forefront of this, I would include Romania. I would include Korea, Japan, Taiwan.
Hmm.
Countries with really just fall off a cliff at some point. And the difference is that there was a floor in Romania, and I'm not sure there is in Taiwan, Japan, Korea.
Not
So what
yet.
do you do? Well, the interesting thing is that those bad demographics have not led to big declines in enrollment in Korea and Japan. And a little bit of that has been because they've been going after older, but not much. Not much. They've just been throwing more students in. They just
Hmm.
lower their entrance standards little by little, and
Wow.
let everybody in. Taiwan is a different story. Taiwan is a place where they're actually closing universities, and they have genuinely open conversations about which universities to close next, and they're looking at closing anything up to about 50. Um,
Mm,
Universities in that country could close in the next decade. So it's wild what's going on there. I think it's pretty interesting. I don't think there are many countries that have made a huge success of bringing in older students, not for want of trying, uh, but it's just harder to get older students to enroll, because who has the time,
sure.
right?
Sure,
I mean,
sure,
I think
sure.
that's a big thing, right? It's time as much as money that becomes the problem.
There was a liberal arts college in the American South, which did a nice thing of for seniors. I forgot how they define seniors. I think it was over 60, something like that.
Yeah,
You could basically take a first year studies curriculum for a year, and they offered this as a pilot, and they didn't have any financial aid for it at all, as far as I can tell. And they filled it up every time they've offered it. You have
yeah.
retirees who would say, either I've always wanted to study this kind of stuff, and at 19 it would have been a waste on me, or they say I'm bored, I have nothing to do, or they say, I'm worried about cognitive issues and dementia and so forth. I want to keep my brain fresh. But that's one. I don't know how to what extent that scales. Um, But Alex, what scales is definitely our gratitude to you for spending an hour with us. It's been like a seminar of global higher education. I'm really grateful to you for sharing your expertise, your research, and your deep analysis of all of this. Let me ask one last question. What's the best way to keep up with you? Is it through your One Thought to Start the Day
The
blog?
one thought to start the day is the best way to do it. Just you can sign up on the blog right now. I think you've got the blog address there. There's a
Yeah.
sign up button. So yeah, I'm Monday to Wednesday, and every second Friday I do a review of world events. So
Well, it's definitely a pleasure, and I'll share this recording with you in just a little while as soon as we get it posted. My thanks to everybody for the terrific questions. Thank you for a great variety of questions. I appreciate all the trust you showed, as well as everyone's thoughtfulness in grappling with what is an enormously complicated subject. So thank you, Alex, and thank you, everybody. We have, just to let everyone know, we have sessions scheduled out right now into November on all kinds of topics from AI to the future, a lot of different areas. So if you'd like to learn more, just go to forum.futureoferducation.us. If you want to look back into our previous sessions, including our first meeting with Alex, you can find that from the forum website. And that's all for now. Please, everybody, take care. Here in the Northern Hemisphere, it may start to get a little cooler, but the fall semester is coming up fast. So, everybody, good luck preparing for that, and we'll see you next time online.
thanks,
Bye-bye.
Brian. Thanks, everyone.